I'm Resh, I'm creative director at AKQA, based in New York. And I've been working in the digital space for around 16 years. And I've been dabbling in what I call the dark arts of VR for around 5 years now. AKQA is a global innovation and design agency, and our work is really focused on the intersection of art, of science, and technology. And ultimately, all we've been trying to do is help brands connect with audiences in a more purposeful way, in a way where they remember the experiences that they interact with, and in a way where they feel they're immersed in a story and not being sold to. The common thread in all our work is storytelling, and it always has been. And I wanted to give you just a little example of some of the experiences that we've made. Here's a little piece of content that debuted in New York for Comic-Con, and our AKQA Portland team had a lot of fun with this one.
Using the Amazon Echo is an experience that's hard to describe. And a traditional ad or product demo can't quite capture how magical it can be. So we didn't just give people a demonstration. We locked them inside one. Echo Escape, the world's first escape experience powered by voice. We built a 5-room, 1,200 square foot house, filled it with Echo devices, and connected 130 individual pieces of Alexa-enabled tech, lights, locks, fans, blinds, sound systems, and cameras, and dropped it in the middle of the largest pop culture event in the country, New York Comic-Con. We took everyday Alexa skills and wove them into a thrilling CIA story that had players racing the clock to beat the bad guys and save the world. Spoiler alert, people lost their minds.
Hey! Come on! Alexa, turn on the fan.
Oh, money! Alexa, change lights to red.
Alexa, show us the garage camera.
Alexa, show me my calendar.
Alexa, find
This is awesome.
You're a hell of a lot smarter than Jack Ryan said you were.
Get me the hell out of here!
Yes! I've waited my whole life for this moment.
Over 4 days, more than 5,000 people lined up to get locked inside a 30-minute product demo.
Going all in.
The press loved it.
That was amazing.
But we wanted the world to love it too. So we partnered with the premier video game streaming site, Twitch, to create an unprecedented live event. 3 of the biggest personalities in online gaming received a mysterious voice-activated package.
Alexa, turn on UV light.
Okay.
Oh my god, this is wild. I can read it now.
Then we locked them in Echo Escape, hijacked their Twitch feeds, and told the internet they could play along. 1.5 million online players joined in.
Alexa, open the safe room door. Alexa, order a pizza.
Echo Escape reimagined the product demo, turning participants into product experts. So whether it's an escape room or your living room, your voice will set you free.
Alexa!
Thank you. So, as you can tell from that film, being able to transport people into another world through immersive storytelling has really been the crux of my work. Since I was a little child, since I began drawing, taking that into digital art, taking that into interactive web, and then mobile, and now VR. It's been a passion of mine from day one to transport people and to that moment where someone can say, I've waited my whole life for this. I mean, when can you really truly create an experience that does that? But in 2013, I received this magic box, and I call it the magic box of delights because it totally disrupted my creative world. It was the arrival of the Oculus Rift headset, and it was 2013. I'll never forget opening this box of delights. Firstly, none of us really knew what we were supposed to do with it. It took us ages to plug it all in and sort it all out. But the moment that we strapped it onto our heads, something happened. Something amazing happened. No work was done in the office that day. We were grabbing everybody and anybody to come try it. And in 2013, all we were doing was sitting on a roller coaster. But it transported us to a completely different world. And it changed the way we thought about how we could tell stories. Within 2 weeks of receiving the Oculus Rift headset, we had pitched and concepted an idea to Nissan, who were my clients at the time. They were very brave to go along with this. But given that the Tokyo Motor Show was coming up and they wanted something amazing to dazzle a younger generation, they kind of came with us on the ride. We created the first consumer-facing VR experience in 2013. It was a partnership between Nissan and Oculus Rift. And it was simple. We just allowed people to design their custom car, all using gaze and in an immersive world of VR. Did we know what we were doing? Of course we didn't. We were just kind kind of learning along the way. We thought we knew. 16 years of being in the digital space, 16 years of being a creative director, everything was thrown out the window of what we thought we knew about storytelling. It was exciting, it was nerve-wracking, and it was thrilling all at the same time. Trying to understand how to build narratives whilst trying to make sure people weren't feeling sick, and all trying to do that within 6 weeks, it was a tremendous challenge. And even you can see from some of the early concept art, we were still drawing the frame. Even in those early days, our focus was really on the audience and telling a story. We knew that storytelling and immersing people into an imaginary world was something that would create that emotional connection. We were ambitious. I mean, when do you get the chance to pitch an idea that has ninjas and samurais and robot arms? And trust me, we pitched everything. And Nissan brought it. Giving people a sense of awe and wonder and a purpose in this imaginary world was really what we were trying to do. But one thing that we never imagined was people's reactions. We couldn't have prepared ourselves for what happened when we hit Tokyo Motor Show. Endless amounts of people, children were dragging their parents in and making them wait over an hour and a half in the queue so they could try this unusual new device. No one had really heard of VR. No one knew what the headset was. They loved being in the experience. They loved making their custom car. To them, it was mesmerizing. I had never seen such reactions from consumers in all my 16 years. I had felt that I'd failed in everything that I'd done before. People were coming off the headset. They wanted to go in and do it again. It was amazing. It gave me goosebumps. And I realized that in 6 weeks, we had barely scratched the surface of what was possible with this magic box of delights. So I spent the next 5 years focusing on what else we could do with this box. Fast forward a few years, this was a recent experience that we've done, and we've learned so much. Well, I've learned so much from that first storytelling experience to creating the Fantastic Beasts VR experience for J.K. Rowling and Warner Bros. In the project, we wanted to immerse people into the wizarding world. That was our goal, to help people step beyond the narrative of a cinema and the stories they read in a book and actually become a wizard. Could we do it? Of course we could. We had our magic box of delights, right? It was very easy sometimes to think that VR can enable us to step into the story, but what we've learned in 5 years, it goes way beyond that. The spectacle of being in a virtual environment, we have to work harder. People demand more. We had to work harder to connect them to the story that they loved so much. And narrative and storytelling was pivotal to this experience. Even though we weren't starting from scratch, it was still really challenging. In VR, there is no camera. There are no cuts. The audience, you are the camera. You're no longer a passive observer in the world. You're now a wizard. So what does that mean? How do we direct you through the story but still not force it upon you? How do we enable you to reach out and explore, but still not push you through and give you the freedom to navigate and decide how you wanted to move through the story? Constructing that story led us to so many questions and challenges. How do we control the user? Do we control the user? Do we use narration? Does narration even work? And again, 5 years into creating VR experiences, we're still asking the same questions. Throughout the project and throughout every project we're doing, we're all figuring it out. Notice the biggest difference here on this screen to the first screen of when we were doing VR. We don't storyboard anymore because there's no frame. What we began to do very early on was we began to prototype, and what you're seeing is some of the early prototype work that helps sell in this idea. I remember being on a phone call with a visual effects advisor on set, and he was telling us about this story and Rowling's amazing magical world. And there was a moment when he said, and this wizard places a suitcase on the floor, taps it with his wand and steps inside. That moment, we knew instantly that was all we needed to do for this VR experience. But would Warners buy it? Instead of trying to draw what the story is, people need to feel what it feels like to be in VR. So we created that little, shaky little suitcase up in the corner. 5 years ago, I would not have fathomed putting that in front of Warner Brothers, but we did, and in the headset, and they loved it. Because in VR, it's how you feel that matters, not necessarily what it looks like. The biggest shift for me in the past 5 years is that we are no longer in a linear narrative. And we've stepped into a spherical narrative space. The story is all around us. We now have 360 degrees to play with. And that, as a creator and a director, becomes equally exciting and also quite scary. What do we do with that? The old rules of storytelling don't necessarily work. We have given the audience the freedom to explore, and with that freedom comes many challenges. The goal for us was really to get people beyond the narrative of the film. The goal for any VR experience is to connect with the audience. We wanted to bring the personalities of these creatures to life, so much so that you felt you could reach out and touch them. So much so that when you took the headset off, you felt like there were no creatures, there were no beasts, but you wanted to spend a little bit more time with them. And you cared for them just as much as Rowling's character does in the films. The response from Rowling fans was overwhelming, but also very critical. They said, "We love this, but it's too short. We want it to be longer. Why can't I go through that door? What happens when I open this drawer?" They wanted more engagement. And because we were delivering this on a mobile device, we were so restricted in terms of how much engagement we could give them. And that was challenging and frustrating for me as a creative. You want to be able to empower your audience and enable them to go wherever they want to in that world. But right now, there are technical limitations that creators have to understand and play with. But what has really happened is VR has changed the way we think about storytelling. And it truly does blur the line between imagination and reality. And as we progress further into finding more and more experiences, we're learning more about what storytelling truly means. Now, we've seen some groundbreaking VR experiences, and I'm so excited for all of you because some of them are all here today. There's an experience I tried last night that I've been dying to try. The makers of that experience are here, Sun Ladies, VR. I had not had the opportunity to try it, and I heard so much about it. I tried it yesterday, and it made me cry. It was so provocative, so simple, but yet so powerful. And since I've taken the headset off, my actual thought is, how can I help? And I don't want to spoil it and give too much away, but if a piece of storytelling can do that to me, imagine how it can change the perception in the world. That, for me, is the power of great storytelling. I would encourage you today to try everything. This is a great exhibition to have all of these experiences in one place. Do not leave today without trying them. It will not only broaden the way you think about storytelling, but it will excite you about the future of what's to come. These experiences alone have shaken the fabric of what I imagine experiences and stories could be. When I was a little child watching TV, I never imagined that one day I would be able to transport all of you right through that frame and into the story. We have entered an era where VR is fundamentally changing the way we think about storytelling. And all of these projects and all of these experiences, it's important to understand how they are progressing the medium forward. We've shifted from linear storytelling to non-linear narratives. But as VR continues to evolve, I constantly ask myself the question, how do you tell stories in VR? What does that even mean? And I've begun to think very deeply about the notion of storytelling. So deeply, it takes me back to the beginning of storytelling. Storytelling started way back in the early caveman times. And it was really a way for us to make sense of the world. It's part of what makes us human, to tell stories. As Sandra said, I'm a parent. I tell stories to my sons when they were small, and I've been telling stories to them throughout their life as they've grown up. It's a way we make sense of the world. It's not just that they get us from A to B. They help entertain us. They help us live. And eventually, those early tribal stories migrated into myths, and what we now know from myths and religions, and from rituals and myths to now religion. But something happened in the 15th century that changed that, and that was the arrival of the printing press. So what changed? Well, what changed was that the notion of storytelling began to become controlled. It became controlled by the writer. The author controlled the story he wanted to tell you. And as we came into cinema and theatre, the artists, the performers control the story that they want you to hear. Right now, I feel like we are in an era of disruption. And it's exciting. VR and mixed reality is disrupting that storytelling process again. Because now you are the camera and you can decide on the story you want to take in. We've moved away from linear storytelling into this spherical space. It takes time to understand how to create new stories in a new medium. And I always love playing this film. This is George Méliès's Trip to the Moon, because I think we can take so many learnings from early cinema. The story of cinema's first steps provide a number of important takeaways. Back then, similar to us, filmmakers were limited by the technical constraints. But it didn't stop George Méliès from sending his audience to the moon. 5 years prior to this film, the first cinema movie, I don't even want to call it a movie, the first cinema piece was played in a theatre similar to this, to an audience similar to you. It was The Arrival of the Train. It was literally a train coming into the platform. Every single one of the audience members got up and ran out the theatre because they believed that that train was going to hit them in the face. Can you imagine 5 years later, Méliès was imagining a trip to the moon. This is the power of storytelling and imagination. And this is where we are in VR. We haven't even reached, we're only in year 5. It took 10 years, a decade, from this film to get to the first full feature-length film, Citizen Kane. I'm excited for who's going to make the first VR Citizen Kane and what that language and what that experience is going to feel like. We're crafting a language and defining a new space for it all, and it's exciting. But how do we do that? We first must understand the medium itself, its strengths and its weaknesses, before we can begin to define what this new method of storytelling is. What makes VR distinct to a storytelling medium? Why are we all so fascinated to it? Why do we remember one piece versus another? And what does that mean for creators who are constantly seeking new ways to tell stories in VR? For me, the key right now is to develop a more rigorous understanding of how VR affects those who experience it. And I wanted to explore 3 of those elements with you today. And I feel like these elements are really defining some of the greatest pieces of work out there right now. The importance of stories has never been challenged. And our need to be part of them and tell them, that will never change. But in VR, are we telling the story or are we living the story? For me, this is the biggest fundamental shift. You are no longer being told a story. You are now living that story. Google's creative think tank coined this term story living, and I love it. It describes how the user interacts with the experience while they're immersed in VR. And it goes beyond traditional storytelling because it captures the idea that as the audience, you are no longer passive and listening to a story. You are now living that story. You are able to take it in and absorb it on your terms. An example I wanted to give you is this is an experience done by The Void. The Void is an immersive, event-based installation, and they created this experience called Secrets of the Empire. As a child, I used to watch Star Wars with my dad. I loved it. And after watching it, I would find whatever looked like a lightsaber, and we would have lightsaber duels. My dad would be Darth Vader, and obviously I would be Obi-Wan. As a parent, I remember the excitement of showing those movies that I love so much to my children. I got an early preview of The Void Secrets of the Empire, and I can tell you it was mind-blowing. You are in a physical space. You don the VR headset. You are no longer watching what you have loved so much. You are now part of that story. You become a stormtrooper. You have a mission. You must complete the mission. Darth Vader comes in. You must defeat Darth Vader. And the fear of when you see Darth Vader in VR, I was cowering behind a virtual wall, knowing that he's a virtual character, but still so immersed in the story because he's Darth Vader. I was no longer an outside in the Star Wars story. I am now part of it. And it left me hungry for more. I experienced the Secrets of the Empire with 3 other participants, all of us having to work together to move around the starship, to protect the lightsaber and the galaxy. I'm a sucker for Star Wars, as you can tell. So it was an easy win. But the experience of living the story is so different to watching it that even afterwards, when I went back to watch The Last Jedi, boy, did I want to just be in it. I was lucky enough to then be able to take my son and my family along to the experience. And as you can see from his face, he also enjoyed it. Being able to now, as a parent, take my children to see Star Wars in a completely new way than how I experienced it when I was a child is mind-blowing. What blew my mind is that this now is a generation, you are now a generation of individuals that will live the stories that we have been told from textbooks to TV in a completely different new way. And that for me is so exciting. You can be part of this world and part of the stories. And the Void, if you ever get the opportunity, have opened up experiences in LA, in Las Vegas, in Dubai, and they are touring. Try the experience. It's completely amazing. And you understand that we are no longer being told the story. We are now part of it. The second way that VR affects the audience is its ability to enable us to shapeshift. VR offers this new form of embodiment that viewers can temporarily identify as their own. And this is an experience that is being debuted here. You can experience this. This is Eyes of an Animal, created by Marshmallow Laser Feast. You can experience what it's like going through the forest through the eyes of an animal. It's quite a deep and profound experience. And science has proven that people who use high-end VR headsets say that their bodies remember the way they moved around the experience. And embodying a digital character or embodying something else in VR stays with them. That's a very powerful tool we have. Wolves in the Wall is an experience that debuted at Sundance Film Festival. I was lucky enough to try it in Dublin a few months earlier, and it's created by Fable Studios. This is an example of being a young girl's imaginary friend. This is Lucy, and Lucy invites you into her imaginary world.
You heard it too. You do, don't you? Hello. But up here, in the attic, the sounds were the loudest, especially in the dark. It's okay. You can take it.
What's amazing about this experience is when you enter it, Lucy draws you. She draws your hands, and suddenly you become connected to her. You are her imaginary friend. Why, as a grown-up, am I so worried about her? Because she brought me into the experience. I'm in her world. You care about her. It's meaningful. And suddenly, within a second, within VR, there's an emotional connection to a character I barely know. And even now, I want to step back into Lucy's world. Why do I wonder what she's up to? What's happening in the attic? Where are the wolves? Again, the experience was too short. I wanted to be in there longer. But this is a groundbreaking experience in VR because they've been using the AI, they've been using characters, they've been using story living as a way to help you connect. And I believe that this is truly the future of maybe our Citizen Kane in VR. We can use powerful connections with audiences in VR and allow them to participate in the world. So not only do I become her imaginary friend, she hands me a camera. Take photos, she says. And before you know it, I'm taking photos and I'm lost in her world. I'm able to pick up those photos, grab the magnifying glass. This immersion and this embodiment and shape-shifting is so powerful. And finally, the biggest thing for me and the most important is that story living has an amazing impact on audiences. It creates this powerful emotional connection. Now, anyone who's interested in VR, I'm sure you've heard about this experience. It's created by film director Alejandro Iñárritu, who is the director of The Revenant and Birdman. And he created what I believe is virtual reality's first masterpiece. Now, sometimes talking about a VR experience is really difficult if you haven't tried it. I've made it my passion, my life's work, to go out and try every single VR experience I can, so I can learn and absorb as much as I can. I had the opportunity to try this. Khan Arena translates as flesh and sand, and to this day, it is the most amazing VR experience, the most amazing experience, the most amazing story I've ever tried. Why? Because Iñárritu did something that all of us have been trying to do. He made this connection. It is not about the technology. It was about the story he wanted to tell. He wanted to tell the story of exploring human conditions for refugees and immigrants. And his passion and his dedication and authenticity to that really comes through in this experience. This experience is done in a huge space. One person can go through the experience at a time. He won a special Oscar in 2017 for this experience. My only negative is that I wish more of the world could try this. When I came out of the experience, I literally felt that everybody in the world at some point needs to go through this. The walls in the experience are made from discarded steel that was once on the US-Mexican border. The sand that you feel when you take your shoes off and step into the experience is from the Mexican border. There are 3 rooms in this experience. It's not just about putting on the headset. It's about preparing you as you step into, live the experience. You walk into a very cold room, the concrete floor, and you begin to observe that there are shoes on the floor. And as I walked around and picked up the shoe of a young child, I got goosebumps because I realized these were actual shoes from the Mexican border. You then go into the VR experience, and you step into this vast room. You walk to the center, you place the VR headset on, and suddenly you are on the US-Mexican border. You're barefoot, you're walking around. It's disorientating. And suddenly, immigrants and refugees are coming towards you, and you are part of their story. I've never been so moved in a VR experience. I've never cared so much now about their plight, their story. You find yourself surrounded by them. There was a pregnant woman. Why am I attracted and focused on her story? She's pregnant, she's with a young child. Is it because I'm a mother? What would you be geared towards? Who would you go towards? The younger man as he's helping the elderly woman? All of these are real people, and Iñárritu brought their stories to life in VR. There's a moment when one of the characters walks right through me. Suddenly I think, is this a glitch? Oh, have I found a glitch? It's not a glitch, because as I walk right through the characters, I can see their heart. And their heart and my heart connect. It's phenomenal. In all my years of watching movies, in all my years of creating experiences, nothing has ever moved me so much as this. And yet this is our director that didn't pick up VR and say, I want to do a VR experience. This is a director that said, I want to tell a story. And I want each of you to understand how it truly feels to be there, to be afraid for your life. And he did that. And it is phenomenal. And to me, this is an example of where the medium can go. I lived that story. I felt like I was on the US-Mexican border. Just the other day, I was speaking to somebody about this experience, and they said, well, why does it impact you, Resh, so much? And I said, because I felt like I was there. My mind can no longer distinguish between reality and imagination. That is the golden chalice of a VR experience, to transport you, to claim a space. He wanted to claim a space so he could take you and put you not in the shoes, but into the hearts of those immigrants. It's not quite Citizen Kane yet, but it's certainly our trip to the moon. VR is really a powerful tool that can build an emotional connection with audiences. We're living the story. We're shape-shifting into different characters. We're able to participate in the world, and we're able to feel and have empathy for the characters and the stories that are being told. The potential impact on our lives is undeniable. But we should really be mindful of the worlds we create, because people will no longer be listening to them, they'll be living them. Through new forms of embodiment, through these powerful connections. And these are just a few of the most compelling story living experiences out there at the moment. The creators have not only understood the medium, but they're pushing the boundaries of what's possible in it. They're breaking the norms. And I urge you to try experiences that do that. Form your own opinions of what is good and what is bad. Something will impact you in a completely different way to how it impacts me. And that is the power of great stories. Nobody truly knows what the future of VR holds. Many people say to me, "What's the future?" And I say, I'm not a mind reader, I have no idea. There are no experts in this field. But what we do know is this is the birth of a new medium, and it's changing the way we're telling stories forever. The best we can do is try to understand it, how it works, what it's capable of. And only then can we really harness its power. And if the internet is a guide of how VR will evolve, people will not just be consuming VR, but they'll be producing it as well. The same way people began to blog, upload videos to YouTube, tweet. It is ours, and it is ours to own. However it shakes out, it's a very special time to be part of this virtual revolution. And the coming years, I know, are going to be a wild ride. We're creating experiences that we never imagined. The stage is set. We are no longer storytellers. We are now the magic makers. Thank you.
I'd invite you